welcome everybody to a special edition of The Human Perspective. Today we're going to have a discussion with Charlotte Mcclain-Nhlapo and Carmen Daniel-Jones about a friend of ours named Deidre Davis, who passed away in August. Deidre was a leader in the disability rights movement, recently had received the Max Starkloff Award for her contribution to the independent living movement, and lived a really wonderful life, and unfortunately passed away way before her time. Charlotte and Carmen were friends with Deidre, and I thought it would be really nice to share our remembrances of Deidre, because I think it's really important that as the leaders of the disability rights movement pass on, which we all will do, really having a deeper understanding about who people are, so that as you're thinking in the future of people to honor and people who you want to share information about, they'll be in your repertoire of thinking. So welcome both of you for coming. Carmen, give us a little bit of background about who you are and how you know Charlotte and how you knew Deidre.
Sure. I'm Carmen Daniel-Jones, as Judy said. Thank you for having me, Judy. And I met, I'm the president of a company called the Solutions Marketing Group, and I work with organizations and companies to help them build a bridge to the disability market.
And so you have disability yourself, right?
I am a paraplegic, yes. I have been for almost 34 years. I met Deidre when I was, and looking back, pretty much a new member of the disability community. It was probably in 1990 or 91. We met at a conference. I had my very first job. I was working at a Center for Independent Living. And at this conference, Deidre whizzed by and turned around as soon as she saw me, and we began talking. And, you know, it was very rare, and it's still fairly rare to see other African-American women on wheels. And so we just, there was really no warm-up. It was just dive right in. And so, she was really helpful in terms of trying to guide me. I was probably a wheelchair user maybe 2 or 3 years, so it was also new to me. And I was working in a role at a Center for Independent Living, helping people achieve their independent living goals. And so Deidre was really a wonderful role model. She was always thinking in terms of the younger folks and how to bring them along into the movement, especially African Americans that she would encounter and who had disabilities, and try to instill in them a sense of pride, not only in terms of our ethnicity and our race, but also in terms of having a disability. And so, and then in addition, we found out later we're both sorority sisters, so we're both members of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And, that made our connection even sweeter. So I would see her at sorority events, and she was always decked out to the nines, and very, sisterly and supportive of our sorors. So she's definitely missed and a treasure in our community.
Charlotte, how did you meet Deidre?
So I met Deidre in 1996. And like Carmen, it was soon after my car crash. I use a wheelchair. And I had come to DC, actually to Bethesda, for an international leadership women's forum. And in typical Deidre style, she just kind of rolled right up to me and she's like, "Hey, who are you? I haven't seen you before." And I was kind of like, whoa, this was all really new to me. I was still kind of blown away by so many women with disabilities. And then just, she came up and she was like, "What do you do? Where are you from? I haven't seen you around." So we started talking, and like Carmen said, immediate connection. And then it was really fantastic that a couple of months after that, she was able to come to Cape Town, where I was living at the time. And she came as part of a delegation from the State Department and they were exploring and trying to understand more about what South Africa was doing post-apartheid, and looking at equal opportunity for different groups, mainly in the sphere of employment. So I spent a week with her, and it was just absolutely fantastic. You know, one thing about Deidre was that she was also really fun to be around.
Absolutely.
She was very purposeful, but she also had a very just, you know, wonderful side of her. We lost connection for a couple of years, but when I moved to DC, we reconnected, and it was like we had never not seen each other. And for me, she was a mentor. She was my confidant. She was my sister. She was my friend. She was all of that. And she also was very caring. She introduced me to a whole host of people that I probably would not have met in the district. She actually introduced me to Carmen and many other African-American women on wheels. And then we set up a group, and we've been connecting it, you know. But she was very visionary. She had a vision of how she wanted people to be more empowered, people to be more engaged. She really enjoyed international work. She loved travel. She loved the idea of speaking to people across the pond and beyond. So yeah, I mean, absolutely will be missed. And there's so many things I could say about Deidre. She was just, you know, smart, sassy, and fantastic.
I met Deidre in the 80s, and Deidre was from New Jersey, and she also had been the director of one of the Centers for Independent Living in New Jersey. And so we would see each other at nickel events. And she also was one of the leaders really pushing for racial diversity in the movement. And she did that from the very first time I remember meeting her. And she also did work with a gentleman named John Galloway, who also was an African-American blind man who was involved with the Center for Independent Living in the 1970s, later went on to become the director of the Peace Corps in Jamaica and came to DC. And Deidre also, I worked at the State Department, but Deidre worked at the State Department in the 1990s in the Clinton administration. She worked in the Office of Civil Rights, and one of the areas that she really was pushing for were accessibility of embassies. And, you know, Deidre, as everyone is saying, was a very smart, articulate woman who really was passionate about the work that she was doing. And also, I think, like we've all experienced, things not moving as quickly as we would like them to move. And certainly in looking at embassies and issues of accessibility, that was an issue that was moving forward, but really did not make the amount of progress that she wanted. But I think clearly was very important in setting an example of what U.S. embassies needed to do. So, you know, I feel like we should talk a little bit more about her legacy and what are some of the ideas that we have about how to continue to allow people to learn about her, and what additional takeaways you may have. And I think, Carmen, maybe for you, because she was in the sorority, maybe are there some things that you feel you could discuss, impacts that she had with sorority members, because she was in the sorority way before you were?
Sure. So, you know, I think the biggest thing with regards to her legacy and, you know, in and out of the sorority is that she always had an eye on how to nurture, encourage, empower people behind her. So if it were in a professional setting, if it were, you know, Deidre's one of those unicorns where she went from government and then went into corporate work. So that is something that's strong with me about her. And in addition, I know that she was very active in her chapter. She was ultimately in a chapter in Northwest Arkansas, which is where she was living at the time when she passed. And I know, because I've spoken to a couple of the sorority sisters there, that she always, not only was talking a lot about accessibility at venues, et cetera, but just ensuring that the younger sorors were, caught a vision for service. And so, it part of what we say in our sorority is it's merit and culture, and that sisterhood, and in serving our community, we empower others. So that was just in her DNA, and she did not shirk any responsibilities. Sorority sisters and chapters in the chapter in Arkansas said if there was a meeting to go to in someone's house, she figured out how to get into the meeting. She did not try to circumvent or avoid responsibilities. And I got the impression from talking to her that the sorority brought her a lot of joy in terms of cultivating friendships, empowering the younger generation, and then where appropriate to sprinkle in some disability perspective so that the sorority became more aware and engaged in issues that impacted us in our daily work.
When I think of Deidre, I think of her always saying, "Hey girl."
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey girl, what's up? Charlotte. Some thoughts about Deidre, and you eloquently were talking about how you knew her. Are there some thoughts that you have regarding what others maybe can do to help continue bringing her memory forward?
Yeah, so she was an amazing, she had such presence. That was another thing about Deidre, right? She just had such intense presence. But I think that comes from a place of confidence, right? Mm. So she had built that up over the years. And I think that that's really an important feature, particularly for younger women with disabilities, to be able to be confident, to be able to feel assured, to be able to step up and demand. And Deidre did so in a way that was really not offensive. She would, bring issues up, but would do it in such a way that everybody felt like they were part of the discussion. So I think the skill of negotiating is a really important one to try and hone. And she did that amazingly. I also think she was, as Carmen points out, she moved through life in different places and spaces, ending up in the private sector. But as I said, she had worked at the State Department. When she came to South Africa, she came with Duval Patrick. And just that imagery of Duval Patrick and Deidre meeting, the high-ranking officials in the South African government was really important.
Duval Patrick, for those of you who might not know, worked in the Justice Department in a senior position in the Clinton administration, when Deidre was working at the State Department, also as a political appointee in the State Department.
And went on to be a presidential candidate. So, she had that presence. She had the ability she was always prepared for discussions. So I think for me, the legacy needs to be that women with disabilities need to step up into the public sector, find service as a space and a place to work, and to work with each other. I think Carmen put this really well. Find your support groups, find your people, find your tribe, work with them, share with them. And she did that all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's a really important feature that we can take forward, just ensuring that her legacy continues. She was mildly obsessive about accessibility. And she challenged rental agencies. She challenged housing development groups that were putting up construction that wasn't accessible. So she was relentless in that fight. But it wasn't the only thing she did. She was very balanced. So yeah, I think it's a big legacy to fill, but I think we owe it to her and those before her to ensure that we take on the mantle and make sure that we bring all of those behind us forward.
I would add, I would just add that, you know, for those of us who are a part of her legacy, you know, she was the first Black woman. I may have mentioned this, but I cannot overemphasize. She was the first Black woman I met with a disability. And as Charlotte said, very confident, very, you know, she was very sassy now and had a great sense of humor, but very willing to share the platform and bring other people with her. And ever since I've known her, it was important to her that the disability leadership become more diverse. And you know, she was very vocal about it. She's probably had very honest conversations with Charlotte and myself about, you know, what it looks like and how to navigate in those spaces. And so this is an example of where representation matters, because if we had not seen her, we would not have known what is possible. So, you know, for me, that is definitely a part of her legacy.
So for me, there are a couple of additional things. One is, take Deidre's example, and we've all been saying this, but you look at yourself and the level of leadership that you're at. Deidre really had many accomplishments when she met Carmen and met Charlotte and met people before she knew them. And she really was reaching out to ensure that people like Charlotte and Deidre, neither of whom had their disabilities when they were younger and might never have engaged in the disability community. She really related, I think, to both of you as Black women, but as Black women with disabilities. And both of you discussed the fact that she was really the first Black disabled woman in a leadership position who was outspoken that you met. So I think that's, for me, part of the legacy. She felt, these are my words, I don't want to use the word obligation, but I think she really wanted to ensure that in looking at the movement becoming more diversified, that she was looking for excellence, people that she felt could really contribute. And I think she was, you know, the many other people that she touched. And so I think these are things for you all to think about. What are you doing? And both as Charlotte and Carmen and myself, I think one of the things that we have in common is we're always looking for other disabled individuals who can be nurtured and supported and encouraged. One of the discussions that I remember having with Deidre very much focused on working in the corporate world and the frustrations that she was having in working in the corporate world as a disabled woman. And I think we're not going to get into discussing this today, but for me, and I think it's true for both Carmen and Charlotte also, when you're a disabled person going into an organization that's mainly made up of non-disabled individuals, there's a lot of thinking and crafting that you need to do when looking at advancing positions. And I think you heard both Charlotte and Carmen talking about, she was strategic. She kind of knew how to play in these worlds. And for me, that discussion with her was really meaningful because we really were relating to the complexities of being a woman, being a disabled woman, her being a Black disabled woman, and all the additional hurdles that we had to go through. So I want to thank you guys. I know we could spend a lot more time talking about her, but I really appreciate that you were able to join us for this. And I really hope, and we'll put a link up to Deidre so you can learn more about her. But the takeaway, I hope, is that you look at emulating who Deidre was, look at how to bring her vision and her joie de vivre. She loved life.
She did.
And think about her, talk about her in your speeches, in your writing. Let her memory be for a blessing. So thank you all very much.